because that's what's going to really cause a lot of sickness and disease is if the plumbing goes out and people have to start, using non-plumbing methods to be able to eliminate. You have to really think for your own family, because that is a serious matter that people always think about food, but they never think about the other side of it, so to speak.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Yeah, I would agree. And even in full-blown ice ages where there's 2-mile thick ice over Chicago and New York and, clear down through Berlin, people still survived that. And I do want to bring up a quickie article here. I have you over on sott.net, SOTT.net. I just did an interview with Sott last week. I'll be posting that up here on my podcast and also as a video format. Incredible interview talking about energetic changes in the atmosphere, energetic changes on our planet, energetic changes in the sun, and a full-on, will be considered sort of a proton wave, if you will, an energetic blast coming through our solar system in this quadrant or this section of the spiral galaxy arm that we're in. 5G, maybe that's to, try to mitigate or make the wave not come through, because the prison planet that we've been set up for, all the satellites around, all the Wi-Fi, all the transmission of electrical signals around, perhaps it's not, they sold it to us as being, hey, wonderful technology, you can communicate with everybody. Look, you can look at your phone on the train. Maybe it was to set up a grid so when this wave swings through of the energetic particles that they've created, that it bounces off and our psyche won't be affected because we're in a different type of a vibrational soup, if you will. Now, with that said, Tibetan Plateau colonized 30,000 years ago. This comes off of Cosmos magazine. Now, you got to think about this. Tibetan Plateau, as we know it right now, is a barren, freeze-dried, impossible to live in almost, except for the most hardiest of people up there. And I can give, the respect for Tibetans that I have, they know the land. Those persons are so in tune with the earth. They live in one of the harshest environments on our planet. So the article was talking about one of the same things I first thought of in cycles of human existence and civilization. Tibetan Plateau colonized 30,000 years ago. Well, the article states that, there must have been abundant game and herds of, animals up there that they could have hunted so easily. And I'm thinking to myself, now, wait a second. 30,000 years ago, there was like 1 million people on the whole planet. Don't you think that this land was not, there was land, nobody even owned land. Everybody was pretty much nomadic. If they did, they set up for a season somewhere. So the value of land, or like prime real estate, if you will, for hunting, etc., 30,000 years ago, unless there was some mass extinction going on or some massive sea level rises that aren't in the geologic record, why would they have colonized the Tibetan Plateau when they could have had much easier hunting grounds way down in, say, Sichuan, which is a verdant forest area, or even further down south in Qinghai? When you get down toward Gansu, same thing. It's right at the base of the Himalaya. Amazing forest, just clean water rivers, etc. Why would they choose to go to the roof of the world to settle when they had so many other easier places to settle? See, this is part of a hidden history that makes no sense. And, you talk about, there's part of our history that's lost, especially just in little snippets and tidbits like this right here. What do you think about these guys settling on the Tibetan Plateau when they could have had easier grounds to settle and game hunt?
And this episode's brought to you by TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds since 1974. Full range of garden seeds, microgreen seeds, sprouting seeds, wheatgrass, grain seeds, flower seeds, herb seeds, and ground cover crop. I encourage you to take a look at their website, TrueLeafMarket.com, and they even have free starter guides there for you to learn how to grow sprouts, microgreens, herbs, and wheatgrass. Use the link below and give yourself the gift of organic and heirloom seeds.
I was just thinking about when you said that, it reminds me of the Piri Reis map that they found, where Antarctica also is like lush and green, and it's vegetative, and that takes me back to the cycles. Now, you were saying 30,000 years ago, that's when they suspect that was more inhabited, right there in the Tibetan Plateau, as you're talking about, right?
Yeah, because they have a bunch of utensils and cutting tools, axes, and a bunch of other things that you would think, from a basic society at that point, at least had some working knowledge of, some engineering, at least enough to chip away and create axes and cutting utensils and tools out of the rocks available.
It would lead me to believe that the cycle is, much obviously not 30,000 years. I think the Piri Reis map is only hundreds of years old. So based upon this map, it could be just 400 or 500 or 600 years ago, maybe even less. There's cycles. I know we said that word 50 times during this conversation. I think it needs to be stressed more because, as I said, we think linearly. We don't think in cycles. Now, I don't know if you saw this, David. You probably did. This goes back to what you just talked about. This is from The Independent, and I read it in others as well. Strange seismic wave that rippled around the world leaves scientists bewildered. I don't think I've seen anything like it, a seismologist says. A series of unusual seismic pulses rippled around the world almost undetected. The waves rang for over 20...
Here's what I found on the web for series of a musical seismic reporter of the world.
Can you believe that my Siri went off when I said that? Isn't that something? Listening to my conversations, my phone.
They're listening to your conversation. You're talking about underwater volcanoes erupting off Madagascar. You shouldn't be talking about that, James.
That's funny. The waves rang for over 20 minutes, emanating about 15 miles off the shores of MIAC, a tiny island in the Indian Ocean between Madagascar and Africa. So we've got these waves coming. You just talked about these cosmic changes that are going on. Now, we've also had, and I want to say twice, in 2017, we had some pulses come from deep space and wash across our planet, and they still don't even know where they came from. They were so far away deep space that they can't detect where they originated. So something is going on, and now the Schumann Resonance, from what I understand, is acting different than it ever has before. There's a combination of many things going on. And, we've talked about food shortages, but you just touched on something briefly that, we talked about. As a matter of fact, we talked off air with John Casey and you and I, and the food shortages is just, you mean inconvenience, but we're talking tremendous inconvenience if what John Casey and what we talked about, and you touched on it, David, during this period of the Grand Solar Minimum, the volcanic activity increases and the earthquake activity increases. Now, if it happens back in the New Madrid, if the New Madrid ruptures in the winter, all of the energy needs for the Northeast is supplied through pipelines and transport mechanisms from the south all the way up through Northeast, a lot of them. If that happened, and the New Madrid fault went and it ruptured and destroyed all those bridges and ruptured those pipelines, I think John Casey told me that truck drivers would have to drive almost all the way up to Chicago to detour to get around to get supplies over to the Northeast. So there are many challenges that lie ahead, and shortages of food is just one of the potential numerous challenges that we may have. God forbid, David, that same thing happens at the New Madrid fault line now that did back then, and I think it was 1812, because the population density is by magnitude greater than it was back then. I don't want to spread doom and gloom. I just want people to be aware that there are some serious changes, and people survive it, obviously. Obviously, people survive it. We just have to be prepared for it. And that's, I think, kind of, David, that's sort of your mission, and mine as well, to a lesser degree, because I don't deal with this specific topic all the time. Preparation, man. I can't think of any word that I could use that would serve people better than to tell them to prepare. What say you?
One of the things to think about, too, is what can you naturally forage around where you're living? And I've said this numerous times. There's an abundant food supply where you live. You just walk by it every day, and you don't know that you can eat it or prepare it in a certain way. Yeah, there's lots of food out there that you just don't know is food that could keep you alive enough to survive through a season and then get to the next season and deal with it as you're moving along. Native American Indians, they set up the forest as a garden walkthrough. And I talked about the same thing that the elites have been doing in some of these islands along the equatorial belts, and billionaires and corporations, et cetera, setting up these areas that they're not actually relying on anything being brought in because everything just grows there naturally. So they're setting up an ecosystem of everything in the ecosystem is edible. And it all has value of either a natural medicine or an edible of some sort. Now think about that. Native American Indians did the same thing. If they saw blueberries growing in one place, what they do is clear out the vegetation so the blueberries could grow and overtake the area where they cleaned out of vegetation that wasn't so useful for them. Same thing with where anything grows that's of use or value or edible to you, just in your spare time, even if you spend 1 to 2 hours a week just going out and clearing out an area so more of that natural area can grow and provide food, then you're at the point where it doesn't matter if anybody walks in your house because your food's outside. Now, if it's in the middle of winter, it's going to be a little more limited, but knowing what you can eat and then also being more familiar, just even getting out on a weekend and going for a walk 2-3 hours in the forest or, some nature areas, nature parks, just learning what the plants and trees are around you, how you can maybe start fires and just different simple stuff, It is about preparation in the mind as well, the body and the spirit. It's not about, if you're at the mind frame already, I'm going to have to fight to the death every day to keep my food supply, you're in the wrong mind frame. You got to be vibrating at a higher frequency of like, we're all working together. I'm going to be taken care of. This is a wonderful existence. Thank you so much for everything I have. If you're vibrating at that level compared to vibrating at the lower levels of fight, doom, gloom every day, I think the vibration we're leaving at the moment, I think this higher vibrational frequency is overtaking our societies, because everywhere you look, you start to see people awakening from the old programming that they were fed. And I don't care what age it is.
And speaking of cycles, the fourth turning, what cycles of history tell us about America's next rendezvous with destiny? The fourth turning illuminates the past, explains the present, and reimagines the future. William Strauss and Neil Howe look back 500 years and uncover distinct patterns. Modern history moves in cycles, each one lasting about the length of a long human life, each comprised of 4 eras or turnings that last about 20 years and always arrive in the same order. First comes a high period of confident expansion as a new order takes root after the old has been swept away. Then comes the awakening, a spiritual exploration, rebellion against the now established order, then the unraveling with increasingly troubled eras where individualism trumps crumbling institutions. Last comes the crisis, the fourth turning, when society passes through a perilous gate in history occurring right now. Together, the four turnings comprise history's seasonal rhythms of growth, maturation, entropy, and rebirth. We sit at the next era of crisis based on the context of history's long rhythms. So the question is, how can all of us prepare individually and collectively for this great rendezvous with destiny? If you want to support this broadcast, click on the link in the description box to the fourth turning. What cycles of history tell us about America's next rendezvous with destiny? Available in both paperback and Kindle versions.
The oldest narratives of the oldest hardcore believers of what was taught are now waking up. So everywhere you see it, there's going to be two ways the society moves as we move forward into the Grand Solar Minimum. There's going to be an entire segment of people who vibrate at a high level they work together, they value each other, and they find that living as a community and finding beneficial, mutual benefit, helping each other, following the passions that they enjoy doing, whether it's gardening this, raising animals over here, transporting some, whatever it is, those are the communities that are going to survive. The ones that are over here on the other side that are about guns and cannibalism and all this kind of stuff, they're going to quickly be taken out, because if you have enough people and you fight off and you kill those intruders to the point where there's no more, literally, because they'll be fighting amongst themselves and gangs don't have any loyalty, they'll be around for a little while. I've seen some really good studies done on if you can last the first 90 days, you're going to be good to go after that. Let's say that earthquake happens that John Casey's talking about in the New Madrid. All the services are going to go down in a second. Your water's going to shut off. Your gas is going to shut off, natural gas. Any liquid fuels are going to shut off. So all the petrol stations will not be delivered to. All the warehousing, all the freight, everything's going to go down. All the refrigeration, all the food will spoil. You're going to have literally just minutes to get your life ready and like accept it, snap. All right, we're going to do a new reality right now. At that point, chaos takes over. And if you have a way to stay hidden or be able to work with others to stay out of the fray, if you will, if you have some basic preparation and you have enough food supplies set back for just a couple of months, you're going to be fine. It's the first 90 days that's going to be the most traumatic. And that's where all the trouble's going to occur anyway. Because people fighting for food, they're either going to kill each other or going to kill each other off. And there's going to be all kind of natural selection happening at that point. Yeah, there might be some armed gangs in the very end, but the fighting they're going to have to do to get that number one apex predator position is going to wipe out an enormous amount of them. So 90 days is what your mark is. And just food for thought, one last thought here. James, I'm going to ask you a question. How much off one pipeline breaking did the prices in New York rise? Remember when they had that pipeline disruption coming out of, I believe it was through Louisiana and up through Tennessee. There was a pipeline that broke. It was a major pipeline that supplied gasoline up to New York State. How much did their prices rise the first day that the pipe was unable to deliver gasoline to New York State? It was only a 3-day event, but how much did prices rise in those 3 days?
I want to say it was like $1 or something. Wasn't it the first day? Was it more than that?
Yeah, something. Yeah, it was something like that. It was $1 something the first day. And you got to realize every other pipeline across the nation was still running. All the petrol stations had petrol. Everything was still in full working order except this one large transit pipeline was out of order. That's it. One little, tiny little grain of sand in the whole beach was not there. And their prices went up by dollars. And what happens when they all break at the same time and there's no delivery left? What's that going to do?
We're talking like Escape from New York type scenario. And that's the thing that in this whole preparation mindset, I would also suggest, if possible, and it's a toughie, relocate to an area that's not so much dense with population, because I think that is one of the things that, people are always worried about, the government coming in and doing nefarious things to them. Believe me, if we have one of these situations where, grid down or massive crop loss, one of these scenarios that we're speaking of, they're going to worry about the government. Believe me, it's going to be the other people that are not prepared, that are starving and that are looking to feed their families and to do things that you would do when you're hungry and you're looking to feed your family that you would normally do otherwise. Yeah, I think that's one of the main things that's going to kill most people. And it wouldn't be uncommon. And this is not, again, we're talking cycles, right? There is, throughout history, there have always been periods of time where the population has been thinned out in a certain manner. You just hope that you're not part of that. But I think we could be coming up on a time, like you talked about, where we could be really losing a lot of the population with what's coming. We're going to have challenges with, I hate to get morbid, but people have to understand the full cycle of life and what happens. And another thing, David, I'd like to stress to people, any chance I can get, a lot about food. We talk about food, but we have to also talk about waste, because when you eat that food, we all know, biologically speaking, something has to happen at the other end. So people have to get prepared, because that's what's going to really cause a lot of sickness and disease, is if the plumbing goes out and people have to start using non-plumbing methods to be able to eliminate. You have to really think for your own family, because that is a serious matter that people always think about food, but they never think about the other side of it, so to speak, to be trying to be benign here.
That's a great point. I mean, you could be the toughest mountain man in the world, like ex-Navy SEAL and super buff and know everything about everything and survive in any situation and get out of any kind of dire strait. But if you don't have cleanliness, you know, your lack of hygiene is going to take down even the most incredible human on this planet. Hygiene is going to be a number one thing. Because after, you know, let's say everybody's going to the bathroom out in the wild. When it rains those first few times, that's all going to flush into the water sources that people are using to collect out of. Right now, you go down to your pond or a lake somewhere in your local neighborhood or in this edgier town, none of it's contaminated like that. But if everybody starts pooing outdoors, the first rainfall, that's going to siphon and go right into the lake. You're going to have a massive algae bloom, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to use the water to cook for anything. So again, a backup source of water, another thing to keep in mind. What about the straw you were talking about? You said you found some new type of filtration straw or something.
I did. As a matter of fact, I have it. I'm going to have that. It is like one of those life straws on steroids. It also filters out all radiation, all bacteria, all heavy metals, and it also raises the pH level of the water up to 9.3, I believe. Yeah, it's from Seychelles. It's called the Omni Straw. You know, and we didn't even touch on Ben Davidson. He's been talking about the polar shift. I don't know when that's going to happen or if that's going to be like a sudden event. I don't know if I've ever lived through one, so I can't tell you from experience. That's another thing, David, that we didn't even touch on is the
polar
potential
wander.
For that. That could really throw a big monkey wrench into things on top of everything else we have going on. I can't think of a worse time for something like that to happen.
Well, unless all this culminates into evolutionary leaps, like Robert Felix's book says, there's an instant evolution for whatever species on the planet to jump out of the dire straits they're in, and they instantly jump into a new form to survive the situations they're in. He's got a great book out there called Evolutionary Leaps and Magnetic Reversals. Highly recommended, by the way. Great read. Yeah, super deep. It talks about the missing fossil records of all these jumps that are just through the whole fossil record. As far as they look back, it's just jump, 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 and they're wondering
what's it called again? I'm looking it up right now. What's it called again?
Magnetic Reversals and Evolutionary Leaps. It's by Robert Felix, the same guy who wrote Not by Fire but by Ice.
Wow.
Who I also did an interview with. I have it up on my YouTube channel, Robert Felix and myself's interview, which was highly interfered with. Like, we had so much static and clicks and all kind of stuff in our conversation. Even he was like, that's weird.
I see it right here. Magnetic Reversals and Evolutionary Leaps, the true origin of species. Good stuff, man.
So
Excellent.
perhaps there's a rollover point where the magnetic poles start to go into their polar wander, and then we get into this decreased solar activity. We got the bombardment of the cosmic rays. We got the decreasing magnetic activity and the poles wandering.
This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.